So good evening, everyone. We are we are starting up our webinar for. I know we didn't have a webinar in May, but we're having our webinar in June, and we're really excited to have all of you join us. I have promised our guests that we are going to be done in an hour, and we're going to try to keep to time today. I'm very time conscious, so we're going to try to keep to our time. I also want to take this opportunity to appreciate you guys for showing up again and also appreciate our guest. She's here and she's had a really busy day and she could have easily sent a mail to cancel in on us. But I want to thank you so much for showing up. So I'm going to start with a number today, and the number is 2.8. So the number we're starting with today is 2.8. And you might be wondering 2.8, what's my business with 2.8? What does 2.8 have to do with me? But 2.8 is the percentage of parliamentarians worldwide who are under the age of 30. And there's another number which is 26.72. And that was the voter turnout or Nigeria's voter turnout in 2023. And that has been the lowest recorded voters number since 1999. And the INEC chairman then himself said that the reason for the low voter turnout was because of non-transparent party primaries that produce unpopular candidates. And so here's the question, or what got me thinking that if the real elections happen in primaries behind closed doors and fought by billions, then who really decides who leads you? I know we might argue, or some might argue on the line of the recent electoral reforms that have really shaped up how, or has really switched how things look now. But we're still talking about what happens, or should I say the elections before the election? So that's what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk lectures or slogans. And we are bringing someone who has been inside the machine and she has fought hard to tear down the walls from within. So her name is Cynthia Mbamalu. So I'm going to go over her bio, very rich bio, but we'll have to shorten it for the sake of time. So she's a lawyer with a master's in comparative constitutional law from Central European University. She is the co-founder of Yaga and currently serves as its director of programs. And she leads work on democratic practice, political inclusion, gender equality, and electoral integrity across Nigeria and Africa. I'm just going to put something in a bracket here. So we were working on a course, and we were actually supposed to bring her as one of the facilitators on that course program because she is a very, very rich person. So she was also pivotal in the adoption of the Nigeria's Electoral Act of 2022. She has led election observation in across multiple African countries and even in the United States. She currently spearheads Watching the Vote, hashtag Watching the Vote, which is a data-driven project that tracks election integrity in real time. Like I said, a very rich profile. She's also a founding leader of the Not Too Young to Run movement, where she helped lower the constitutional age for contesting elections in Nigeria, which was a historical win for youth political participation in Nigeria. So she also runs community organizing programs for young people in Nigeria and in West Africa. She mentors youths and hosts the Unamplified podcast. She's an alumna of the executive programs at the Harvard Kennedy School, CEU, UNISA, and the University of Cape Town. And she currently serves on the board of Amnesty International Nigeria. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, Miss Cynthia. And thank you for making time. She's currently in Nairobi and we're keeping her past her bedtime. Let me just say that we're keeping her past her bedtime. And she's there for a conference with African leadership founders. So she's been very busy and she still volunteered the time to speak about something that that shows you that she's really passionate about this thing, one, and two, we're going to have a very interesting time with her. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just going to go right into it because, like I promised her, I wouldn't keep you too long past your bedtime. So we're going to start with a little bit of a backstory from you. So
Yeah.
when you tell the story of the hashtag not too young to run to a group of young people, what part of it do you tell first, or what was the moment that you realized as a person that this law has to change, or the moment you realized that changing the law wasn't really enough? So it's like a two-edged question. The first one is, when did you realize that this law had to change? So let's start with that.
Thank you, and well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where people are listening in from. Yes, first, I'm in Nairobi for it's actually a Yaga Africa event, and we're discussing African leadership philosophies because we think
Yeah.
it's time for us to start reviving our philosophies and building a system that works for Africans. Now, when you ask this your question, it looked like a trick question because we've gotten. I think yes, I think I've gotten a lot of these questions, especially the law was signed in 2018, so we had the constitution was amended in 2018, which was just close to the 2019 general elections. And
Yeah.
then after during the general elections, a lot of young people aspired. In fact, 2019 elections, we had an increase in youth candidacy, youth representation post the elections in parliament, that's in National Assembly and state assemblies.
Yeah.
But since then, we've been struggling to even get the number. So when you ask, I think the first thing for me always is a sense of pride and belief that there's power in coordinated advocacy that is driven by young people. And I say that because Not Too Young to Run did not just happen overnight. The first time we pushed for the amendment of the constitution to reduce the age to contest for office in Nigeria was actually in 2009 when we were still students. So you can imagine that from
Yeah.
2009, it failed then, obviously. 2012, there was another constitutional amendment process. Did a lot of work with youth groups across Nigeria. It still failed in that amendment process. That was the amendment process before the 2015 general elections. And then we came back
Yeah.
at it again after the 2015 general election. So the fact that it took us from 2009 to finally achieve an amendment in 2018 shows that it was a long journey, say a long walk to freedom. And so for me, the fact that when we started the movement, I was still very, very, very young. I was a student. When
Yeah.
it got passed, I was already, much older. But it so that's why there's always that sense of pride that it is possible that young people can organize and build a movement, drive an advocacy, and amend the constitution. So each time I read the constitution and I see reduction of age to 25 for House of Representatives and state assemblies, I have a sense of pride and then hope that things can change. It takes time, but it can change. And then each time I see that to run for president, you just need to be 35 and not 40 like what it was before. That's also the sense I get. But all the advocacies we pushed for did not go through. We
Yeah.
with the last phase of the proposal, in fact, part of all from 2009 to 2012 to the 2016 phase, we had two proposals: reduction of age and independent candidacy. And this will connect to the next question, the second arm of your question, because the idea was we wanted independent candidacy because we believe that younger people may compete better if they are running as independents, meaning that you're not
Mm.
limited to run on a political party platform. Because currently, Nigeria's constitution makes it mandatory to contest for office. You must be a member of a political party, and so we've been pushing for independent candidacy. During Not Too Young to Run was two things actually: reduction of age and independent candidacy. But independent candidacy did not get the kind of attention it needed, and so it failed along the line. And so we just continue. When you push for things, you wouldn't get all your demands. We didn't get all the age reductions we wanted for all the offices. We got some, and then we didn't get independent candidacy. And that's the other part of the worry that comes with we've gotten this reduction. 25-year-olds can run for office now, which is what we wanted. Have
Mm.
younger people in the national and state assemblies because Nigeria is a country with a large youth population.
Youth
But
population. Yeah.
we've seen the barriers with that. That it's be- that yes, you have the law, but there are several other structural barriers limiting youth political representation, both at the level of party primaries and then during the election itself.
Okay. So seeing that this was a long fight from 2009, and then you participating or fighting in the not too young to run, and then finding out that okay, I think I've even passed the age for the people I was pushing for. So would you say that by the time you discovered that it was just one part of the not too young to run, what your demands were, when you found that it was just the age being lowered and not the independent candidacy, would you say that you sort of foresaw these issues that we're talking, some sort of these issues we're seeing today? Would you say that you sort of foresaw these things coming forward?
Yeah, actually, we did because I mean, I've been engaging elections. We've been engaging elections before that, which was why our engagement for the amendment of the constitution wasn't just theoretical. We were using experiences from the field and trying to use that to advance. Now, what do we understand about presidential systems like ours and the kind of our elections? The truth is, election is expensive, and elections are expensive everywhere. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
our system is largely modeled after the American system, sadly, and that is a system that is driven by money. In fact, if you follow the American elections, you will see that money there is no limitation on spending, and so we understood the fact that there's a lot of cost that comes with contesting for office. But for every engagement, the first thing we wanted to do was to remove that constitutional barrier that tells young people you have no right to even aspire. Because
Mm,
what the age reduction bill was basically hoping to achieve, which is what it's achieved, was where like you should not have a constitution telling young people you cannot even aspire until you get to this age. Let's remove that. Let people dream and aspire first, and then they can
mm,
leverage several means or several opportunities to build their popularities, but do not limit their dreams or their desire to lead. And so
mm,
that was what we were hoping to achieve, and we achieved it with that. Pose the Not Too Young to Run. I mean, initiatives like Ready to
yeah.
Run. There are several others with other partners that are basically designed to support young people or youth candidacy. A lot of those programs are able to succeed today or are able to be implemented today because there is an age reduction that happened. And so for
Mm,
me, the purpose was achieved. We wanted to remove that limitation that says you can't even contest. And post that, we've seen 26-year-olds win elections, under 30-year-olds win, small numbers, but we've
yeah.
had that. But what it has done is also it has increased the number of those who are within 30 to 35 winning, because the how do I put it? The projection is, if you have, let's say if you have 100 young people running, there's a likelihood that at least 30 or 20 would win. But if you have only 20 running, there's a likelihood that
Yeah.
only two or three would win.
Reduces.
So the higher the number of younger people contesting for elections, the higher the chances of an increase in youth representation. But if you
Yeah.
close the door and you have a lesser number competing, then it becomes problematic. And so, maybe to tie it on the cost question, elections, not just in Nigeria, if you look at countries in Africa, they are quite expensive. However, we are seeing younger people becoming more creative on how to fundraise, and how to build their popularity in a way that it becomes a buffer, or it becomes the strength that they need to fight against the big money bags.
Mm,
Unfortunately, these money bags, they are very, very vicious, very, very, they are part of the our problems in our democracy, because most times their interests do not align with the interests of the people, and their goal is just to get from the system and close the space. When it comes to close the space by excluding young people and even women and persons with disability. So
yeah.
it's the nature of our politics.
All right. So it brings me to the next question. So the title of tonight's conversation, I think I was trying to find a way to fine tune it, and it was like billionaire politics, because I think if you limit it to just millions, you find out that it costs way more. So it was billionaire politics, who really decides who leads you? So
Mm.
when I was sending the page and everything, I was trying to come up with a whole concept note to share with you. So when you, from your years of watching elections, observing election primaries, party backrooms, what was your instinctive thought when you came across the topic, or what feeling, or was there a memory that probably came up first to you when you came across that?
Well, when I want to even commend whomever, so I think it's you I should commend now, who crafted the topic, billionaire
Thank
politics,
you.
because it got me here. It got me thinking about a lot of things. And I think one is the tragedy of our political system that has become so commercialized that it is now within the exclusive right of those who have excessive monies, and most times monies stolen from the state, meaning our
Yes.
national wealth, our collective common wealth. And so that's the tragedy of our political system. If we follow elections consistently, almost successive elections, there is a higher cost for nomination to even aspire at the party primaries level before proceeding to contest in the elections. And so for me, this question or the topic should be a point of reflection for every Nigerian and every young person listening, even beyond Nigeria. And the question is, do we want to remain silent in the face of the oppressive use of money to determine who leads us? Or do we want to start devising ways to challenge these money bags so that our rights as the electorate becomes the primary source of who becomes the leader in our country? And I say this because a lot of times we always feel that we're helpless, things can't change. But it begins with how we engage with the reform systems. We have like, let me just borrow your term, a billionaire politics, where the outcomes of elections are predetermined because it is about who has the most money to spend. To contest for party primaries in the different political parties in Nigeria, you need millions of naira, millions of naira. Like your questions are in how many young people can afford that amount to contest in an elections. But the question is,
Yeah.
why do they set it so high? Why has it become a trend or a pattern or a culture to put the cost of nomination that high? And there's a simple answer. The higher we put the cost, the less likely younger people emerge, the less
Um,
likely people with innovative minds, people that are competent with the requisite capacity and character emerge. So put as high, put as put an exorbitant fee to close up the space so that this politics becomes the game for only those who can afford it. And so what we have done is we've made our political system so commercialized that it's so transactional. It's all about who has the most money. And that in itself is problematic. Why? It limits our choices as voters because you can only vote candidates that emerge at the polls. And so access to ballots is now determined by who the highest bidder. And so it's almost like only those who can pay as much would have access to the ballot. It's no longer about ideologies or capacities or competencies or your character, meaning that thieves now get the chance to get on the ballot if they can pay the price, meaning that people that have looted us of our national wealth can get on the ballot if they can pay the price, meaning that individuals who lack integrity have no atom of character can now access the ballot as long as they can pay the price. And that in itself is the tragedy of our society. That in itself is a major threat our democracy is facing. And so if I want to bring this all together, I would say for me, the conversation that in our reality, even if you follow the recent primary elections for the 2027 elections, these ones that were just concluded, I mean, some are still trying to conclude their processes. If there's one thing we have seen is that power has been forcefully taken from the people, and power has now been forcefully retained by the few who have money. The second is that the voice of the people and the desires of the people has become irrelevant to the political class, who believe that only their monies would keep them in office or would get them into office. And the third part is our political parties are now becoming the major threat to our democracy. Before, you will say, oh, our worry is a military takeover. That is the least of my problems now, because our fear for military takeover is the least of our worries, because military is, what are they going to take over? A non-democratic society? We don't even have a democracy now, because the political parties that ought to be the democratic institutions or the institutions of democracy have become the single most dangerous threat to our democracy, because they have imbibed undemocratic practices. Their political culture lacks foundation in democratic principles and norms, and they conduct themselves like dictators who impose candidates on the people. Because when primaries are not democratic and credible, whomever emerges is an imposition on the people. And so we're forced to vote in line with a dictator's choice. And that's why, for me, why this billionaire politics is, we need to understand why we're in a dire situation. We're not just talking about money, but how money has been used to undermine democratic principles and norms. Money has been used to force people, to force candidates on the people, and money has been used to ensure that this politics is a politics that is driven by dictators. And that those are the few guys that they just dictate what happens. And you look at the party primaries, a lot of the candidates, a lot of the aspirants are complaining online. People are, there's a lot of grievances. So if you see party members are complaining, they feel powerless. How do you call this a democracy anymore? And so it's about dictators determining what happens and monies influencing the situation. And maybe the bigger question is, what do we want to do as a people? Are we going to sit down and be comfortable with this new culture of billionaire politics that is so anti-democracy?
All right. So it brings me to the next question. So, like you said, you fought for the age barrier to fall and also independent people running independently. And then I'm sure it might have been really painful for you to watch nomination forms cost millions. In the recently concluded primaries, one of the major parties' presidential nomination form was going for 100 million naira. And then we had another party that offered a 50% youth discount, which brought the forms to about, I think, 45 million naira. So I think I was trying to do the math for an average permanent secretary would need to save his salary or her salary for about 13 years to be able to save that amount of money. And that is a permanent secretary. So I can imagine a 25-year-old teacher or a 25-year-old nurse. So I'm trying to phrase the question to what can we say are the achievements of the not too young to run um, campaign if money is still a huge gatekeeper to young people actually turning up? Because it feels like the people or the younger people who are able to turn up are people that have backings or have to rally funds from still in the circle of billionaire politics. You still have to meet a godfather to rally funds to help you run. And then are you really running independently if your campaign is heavily funded by these same people that we are trying to push out of the way? Are they really going out of the way, or they're just becoming puppet masters in this situation?
Well, okay, so I'll two angle to this question. I think the first part is to acknowledge the resilience of the young people who are actually aspiring and contesting the elections, regardless of the challenges. And I'll give examples from 2019. We we had about 22 under 30-year-olds, if I'm not mistaken, who won their elections. That's mostly at the state assembly level, and then maybe few, yeah, at the state assembly level. This 2023, we had 27-year-old or 26-year-old who won his election in the House of Representatives. And then we had more at the state assembly level. So what we're learning is that we have better chances for younger people to win state assembly elections and House of Representatives. One, is a smaller geography you need to contest. Two, you're not spending as much money. It's expensive, but maybe not as much. But if you ask me about if I want to connect it to the not too young, to like I mentioned, the amendment of the law was just to delimit the constitutional hindrance or limitation of the constitutional restrictions to contesting office. Now, post that, what we've just seen is political parties have become too rascally. Cost of nomination was not this high before, but they've just become very, and I just use the term, that's the think what I irresponsible. I think more irresponsibility is more of irresponsibility for me by putting that cost. Why? 2019 scared a lot of politicians. The not too young to run scared politicians, and it did not help that NSAS happened in 2020. And for them, the last general elections was how I knew they were really afraid, because in 2019, you actually had some parties giving concessions to young people. They were surprised that young people could push for an amendment and threaten lawmakers to vote in support. And I say this because one of the states voted no, and young people camped in front of the state assemblies and said every lawmaker from that state assembly would not return if they don't reverse their votes. And for the first time, you saw a state assembly reconvening to vote again, to reverse their vote, and they voted yes. And that probably one of the few laws that has achieved about 33 states voting yes in support of it. Most times you get 27, most times you get 26 or 28. And that in itself was a major threat to the political class, which was why we had a higher number of young people winning in 2019. They didn't see it happening. But what happened was a lot of young people, once they went to the big parties and they were not getting tickets, they moved to some of the newer parties. We had this guy, this young man from Nasarawa, who ran on the Zenith Labour Party. At the time, most people don't know what ZLP was. But the party he wanted to run in, the cost was too high. He couldn't afford it. But already he was a popular youth leader in his community, student leader. So he had that popularity in his constituency. So he just went to ZLP, the party was looking for people to contest, and they were happy to give him the form. He didn't have to spend that as much. And he won and unsat a member of the state assembly who was in a ruling party. So this was a shock to them. A lot of the young people that won at the time, some of them won on platforms that were not so popular. But the moment they were not getting tickets in the big ones, they were moving to the smaller ones or the parties that were not so popular. And so that became an opportunity for younger people to emerge. However, 2023, it became a lot more toxic, because I'm not sure why our politics is not so friendly to young people. It became a lot more toxic, and the rules changed. Even the newer parties started increasing their cost for nomination. And so what are we learning? One thing we're learning from the Not Too Young to Run movement, and I'll compare it with a story from an experience from Malaysia. We're talking one of the young member of parliament. They also had a movement, but what they did was they started, as they were advocating, as they were pushing for youth inclusion, they were building a political party for young people. And so most of them, like the lady that would I can't remember her name has just left my mind. She's a member of their parliament in Malaysia. She ran, I think it's the UDM party, ran on the platform of that party. And she said, I mean, there is a party that the party executives are in their 20s, 27, 28, 30-year-olds. And so when I said, okay, this was actually something that we should have thought of. I mean, Not Too Young to Run was non-partisan, because it was an umbrella for young people across board to connect. However, part of the engagement, Ready to Run started, I felt a bit late. It would have started earlier, that as we're moving to amend the constitution, there's also a drive for young people to register in parties in their numbers, so that they can begin to influence decisions in those parties, or that those parties that claim to be called youth parties or so, that there are more young people that get into those parties, and that party becomes a platform for younger people to contest, where young people are determining and deciding the rules. And that's the big lesson from that we need to start thinking around moving from social movement to political influence. We need to start translating the powers we have from our street actions, our advocacy efforts. We need to start building that into political power to influence electoral outcomes, because we've seen it work in some countries. And that is a lesson we're learning, that the kind of momentum the Not Too Young to Run brought. Imagine if we are built on it during the NSAS, also built on it too, and got younger people to either register their own political party or join some political parties that had, they were not so popular. Maybe they did not have the big names that we know in politics, and then build it as their party and have a principle. If you're a young person and you align with these characters and ideologies, this is your platform, and you build around it. Because the truth is, they say power is not given a la carte. You can't say because you're young, things will change. It's never really worked that way. We need to start learning that as young people, that power and energy, we have to start thinking strategically, or young people need to start thinking strategically. How do you move the power and energy from the social media spaces, from the offline engagement and protest, and start thinking about political influence and influencing electoral outcome? The story from Malaysia was so inspiring, and I was just too happy to see a party leader, the president, the chairman of the party, the secretary, 20-something-year-olds, and they were building for young people, and they were putting young people into their parliament. And their goal was just, as long as you're young and you align with our values and principles, come in, this is your party. They fundraise differently. They do car wash parties to raise money. They do GoFundMe. Like, their own level of fundraising is so diverse that no one person can say they own the party, because the idea was we went to do politics differently. I think that is a lesson that we can adopt or adapt within our own context in Nigeria.
So, when you say the Malaysian story and putting it on a parallel side by side with Nigerian story, it's more or less that they are being encouraged by the parties. So that's like something that. So I think it feels now that when you see other countries or you see other stories, it feels like, okay, there's a deliberate attempt by our own politicians to sort of maybe block these things, except it's for loyalists. So I think it now reframes how you see because it could be possible that we could have some sort of quota systems, because it feels like once they assign you as a youth leader for a political party, okay, that's enough. And
No, these
yes, you're
ones, they formed their party. Youth formed their party. They became their
okay. So
chairman.
youth,
They had, yes, the party was strictly
okay,
youth party. From the movement, they registered a political party because the bigger parties were not giving them opportunities. So
okay,
it was that's why I said that was a different lesson. They didn't go into
okay.
the older parties. They started their
Okay,
own
so I
stuff.
think that puts those things in context. So you've also been an electoral observer and you watched elections across Africa. I know you said yes that Nigeria's political system is somewhat modeled after the US, where money there's no cap on like how much exactly goes into funding a political campaign. So is this money problem when we come to this deliberately maybe raising funds and then pushing out the younger generation? Is it a uniquely Nigerian thing, or have you seen the same playbook in probably Kenya, South Africa, or maybe there's a country that you can also highlight for us to see that okay, this is maybe a unique problem, so we can look inward, or if it's an African thing?
Okay, so under our constitution, our electoral act, there is restriction on spending, but that is only for campaigns. And maybe that's where we differ a bit with the US. US is no restriction, but at least the electoral provides that to contest for the office of, well, sadly, this new electoral 2026, they increase it to 10 billion naira to contest for the president. That's the amount you can spend. So we have some limitation on how much you can spend, even though none of them respects that. But we don't have a limitation or a restriction on nomination, which is the monies candidates or parties set for
Mm,
aspirants to contest in the primaries. And I think that's what because we need to break out this cost. The cost for campaigns, different ball game. The cost for primaries itself, different ball game. It's tedious, but it's not just a Nigerian reality. Some countries are cheaper. Cape Verde, for instance, I like the example of Cape Verde. The money is well regulated, and they have a very strict political financing law that limits how much you spend and makes it a lot more realistic. Ghana, for instance, nomination is not that expensive. In fact, in the 2024 elections, if I convert it to naira, it's about roughly 9 million or so. That was the average needed for candidates that to contest in the primaries in Ghana. If I convert it to naira, it's 8 point something, 9 million plus or minus 9 million naira, which I think is reasonably fair because ours exceeds a lot more. Kenya, on the other hand, is more expensive for the nomination. In fact, for Kenyan is as high as 150 million plus for the candidate nomination. So every country has its own peculiarity. I'm using 150 million plus, that's in naira. I'm using now, I did just the conversion from Kenyan shillings to naira and then from Ghana cedis to naira. So different countries have different restrictions. But interestingly, in Kenya, you may spend more for the primary, but less for the campaign. Because during campaign, most people are just interested in what do you have for us. Voter inducement still happens, but it's not in the magnitude ours does. And so once you pass the primaries, you're trying to build your manifesto a lot more because people are going to be asking you questions on what do you want to do and how you want to do that, even though there's still like voter inducement or some form of vote buying happening. In Ghana, the difference there, and I always like to give an example. Always try to give an example with Ghana, because Ghana's election 2024, I was there the pre-elections phase, and I visited different beyond. I'm not even in Accra, as far as the northern region, Savannah region in Ghana, and I was impressed with how the parties were deliberately engaging young people in the parties. One, to canvass for vote. So you had student members of parties, youth members of parties who were doing door-to-door voter application, door-to-door voter mobilization, because there, even though there's vote buying, it's not as pronounced as ours. So for the young people that emerge, they don't have as much pressure on them to spend during campaign because they are focusing on building their manifesto. And so if you ask me, I actually wish we would learn more from Ghana. I think that Ghana within West Africa, because also Ghana is West Africa, they're like our sister nation, we're like brothers and sisters. I think they
Yeah.
are our political class, our politicians, honestly, they need to learn from the Ghanaian politicians because when you talk with the political parties in Ghana, they cannot even understand why our politicians are the way they are. They actually always feel shocked when they follow our politics because for them, they think that is just unscrupulous, that is just irresponsible, the way your politicians behave. They've somehow learned how to regulate money a bit, and then they've also learned how to create spaces for young people within their parties and to make concessions for young people within their parties. And so Ghana is an example. They don't need to spend that much. They are focusing on ideology, your manifesto. And that is where we need to move to. Let's start focusing on that. And maybe it's a call to Nigerians. We are also part of the problem. When young people that contest elections, because we work with young people and women that run for elections, part of their challenge is they go to communities to talk about what they will do. Communities are telling them, now waiting we go chop. Is this what we will chop? What do you have for us? And so if Nigerians want quality leadership, accountable leadership, we also need to start changing our demands. Because if we are only dancing and celebrating those who give us peanuts during campaigns, then we would never have the opportunity to interact with those who actually will get the work done. When people spend so much money to contest elections, there is no how they feel accountable to us because to them, their money's got them in. And so for me, this is also a two-edged sword. Yes, we can learn from Ghana. The political class can reduce the expenses, but Nigerians too, we should stop demanding. By the time we start saying no to people's monies, we don't care how much. In fact, the parties, we should even start boycotting parties that charge exorbitant fees. And say, for you to charge this amount, it means you guys are a group of thieves who want to steal our national wealth when you get into office, so we wouldn't vote you. If we start boycotting parties that are charging exorbitant fees and acting so insensitive to our economic realities, and start saying we'll pick parties or vote parties that do not make money the center of the decision, I think that it also gets parties to start acting. The problem is we accept anything, we celebrate anything, and we complain, but once the money comes, we keep our mouth shut. And that is where the bigger issue is. Let me even add this. In Ghana, there's actually a saying that the party that spends the most would lose the election. It's so funny because last election, the ruling party lost. When you talk to some of the young people, they'll tell you the money they are spending is our money. It means they are not accountable to us. And one politician actually said it to us that whenever someone spends too much in our elections in Ghana, they vote that person out because there's a mindset that if you're spending this much, it means you do not believe in your capacity and you think your money will sway us. So they will collect your money, but they will still go and vote differently. And that for me was a big lesson that we can even take as Nigerians.
So, so moving on to the next question. So, at the earlier stages of the conversation, we were talking about. I think we were hammering heavily on political parties that are supposed to be the gateway to power, but in reality, often act as gatekeepers, selling tickets, protecting incumbents, and from your experience, I think you were when you highlighted the example of the Malaysian Youth Party, we were talking about building new ones. So, is it that you've sort of lost hope on reforms happening between the pre-existing political parties? Because usually, when I think sometimes you see people saying forming new parties or forming their own parties, but then you then get the argument of structure. Because especially if you look at the Nigerian situation, it's one thing for you to amass votes actually at the ballots and then actually see those votes transform into actual votes. So there's also the enforcing arm and all that. So can we really reform these parties from the inside, or do we have to just abandon them and build new ones entirely?
Even the way you're asking this question, I could see your internal battle with yourself. Like, I don't even know how this would work. The truth is, so when you already have parties where people believe that they own the party, they believe that they are controlling the structures, it's difficult for you to come in and say, oh, now we're going to take over. However, it's possible. Why do I say it's possible? You can have young people massively register to become members of some of these parties and start building within the party. That's one. My other option would be that we have more than two, we have about 22 parties, 22 political parties contesting these elections, meaning that there are so many other parties, most of us don't know the names of these parties. Can we start identifying those parties and even register? Can younger people register in political parties so that you build your number? That's another option. The other option is after the next phase of elections, there can be an opportunity for a new registration of political parties, and people can now, let me explain structure. The thing about structure is for structure, what parties, when they talk about structure, is that at least they know in every ward, we have about 8,000 and something wards in Nigeria. In every ward, they have at least one person. So are we saying that if we're intentional and deliberate, can we say that we wouldn't have Nigerians, young people across each ward in the country who can become the members and start doing membership drives at those local level? Because what structure is having presence across the 774 local governments and across the ward level. And then because within ward, you can mobilize polling units. That's how elections, politics is local. It's not about concentration in one urban area, and it's not about engagement on social media. Digital engagement, digital activism is powerful. However, to win elections, even if we have independent candidacy, independent candidates would need to build popularities in their constituency. And so for me, if young people want to influence or change anything, no one will hand over power to you. Those who are in power fought for it. Most of them had played the long game. They've been in the political space for 30 years or longer, during military, after military. And so for young people, I'm not even using young people need to understand that getting involved in political party politics is important, and that includes finding your ways into the existing one or coming up with an idea of registering yours. There was a membership drive by some of the parties this year, I saw a lot of young people registering. I'm not sure what they were registering for, why they were registering, but I was hoping that they knew the importance of building membership. Because imagine, even in the big ruling parties, if you have if you have 10,000, or even an accurate number, let's say 1 million youths across, because we can get 1 million youth register in those parties, it becomes difficult for a few to change, because those people with their membership and their active can change the policies in within the parties. But I think we've never really taken this from a strategic point of view, because the average Nigerian youth gives up easily when it comes to politics. It's easy for us to say we're tired and we're giving up on politics. But the truth is, there is no system that is built by people that came from outside. It's those inside that build the system. People build the system. The young people I saw doing house to house mobilization in their state, in their respective provinces in Ghana, are young people. Most of them were 18, 19, first time voters. And they were they were moving around. Nothing stops us from Nigeria from doing that. But are we resilient enough to really engage? I think Nigerians, we move on too fast, we give up very easily, and we always act like our problems are worse than every other country. No, our problems are not worse. And I've observed the elections in countries like, in Liberia, poverty level is worse than in Nigeria. But turnout was about 70 something percent, 78% voter turnout. These guys vote in classrooms that I was struggling to breathe in, but they were there to vote. They were not joking. Our driver that was kind of observers, he just told us, Ma, I vote. I wait, I go, I vote and carry you. Like, even the people working, they're telling you they will stop and go and vote and they can continue their work. And I was too inspired to see how they took that voting too seriously. But that is what we are lacking here. It's easy for us to complain and agonize. It's easy for us to say, oh, we protested once. There were things that happened. We lost people, and so we're not showing up. Guys, Kenyans, they've been protesting, Gen Z protest. Almost every protest, they lose a citizen. That's not something I talk about with pride. That's sad. But it has not, they remain resilient. They protested last week. I'm sure if I follow the news, there's a protest this week or sometime this month. These guys have realized that they need to keep speaking up, they need to keep engaging, and they cannot let their political class sleep. That's the difference here. In Nigeria, we move on easily. And I wish Nigerians would understand the power in our number, the power in our unity, and the power in a united sense of purpose. We struggle with that. In these elections, you will see very soon, we're going to start fighting against every ethnic and religious line that ever existed, including young. In fact, young people will be leading this fight on Twitter, on Instagram, and on different social media spaces. So how will the political class take us seriously? Because for them, they understand how to manipulate our identities, and they've learned it, so they know that nothing they get the kind of revolution that will scare them away from political office.
All right, so we have a few questions from the audience, and I would like us to take it so that we do not shut them out completely. So I think someone was concurring that when we're talking about, I think I raised the question on it might take a permanent secretary 13 years to save up the money. Person said yes, and there's no guarantee that at the end of the 13 years the price would not have increased. So you're working, and it's almost like you're throwing your efforts away. The goalpost keeps shifting. So we have a question. I think you sort of answered that question. It was, should we focus on fixing current systems or building parallel structures like youth-led parties? So I don't think we have. I think she has sort of answered that. This question came in a few minutes ago, so I think we've sort of answered that in the course of conversation. Someone is asking that as a young woman, you're facing ageism and sexism. So which barrier is harder to break, and how do I fight? How do I fight both of them at once? So I
That's
think we'll
that's
start.
a difficult one. Yeah, do we take all the questions and I just
No, I think
respond?
no, would you want to take all of them at once, or should we go one
Yes,
after the
yes,
other? Okay, so we
yeah.
have we have another one that says overspending should be a factor to vote out some leaders, but why collect their money and still and still and still vote them out? I think those are the two that we have for now, since you've already answered the one that came in earlier. So I think these are the two that we have for now. Yes. So I'm going to give a five
Yes.
minute window, and then if there are no more questions, I will close that window because of time. Yes. So you can go
Okay,
ahead, ma'am.
the overspending question is, so you say, why collect their money and still vote them out? Because for them,
Yes.
I mean, this is what I saw, like I said, in Ghana. For them, they said, well, you stole out, this money is actually stolen funds. So we're going to collect it and we'll still vote you out because we don't trust you. I mean, there was actually a campaign then that said, with vote buying, collect the money and vote your conscience. We've seen that campaign in Nigeria, but it has not worked effectively in Nigeria. But I saw it working in some places in Ghana. And that was what the campaign was: collect the money and still vote your conscience. It also happened not just in Ghana, even in some places in Kenya. Because vote buying, like I said, is not just happening in Nigeria, just that Nigeria, ours is more, it's done with a lot more impunity. Can you hear me? And then the
Yes, we can
question
hear
on
you, ma'am.
ageism and sexism, I totally understand what you're saying. For a young woman, it's double jeopardy. You're young and then you're a woman, and if you're unmarried, it's even you're young, a woman, and then single. A lot of it's the stereotype. It is so frustrating that it becomes a major limitation to women emergence in politics and even in political leadership. And so we can't expend energy fighting the stereotypes. All we can do is to provide a counter narrative. And what is a counter narrative? To For the younger women, we have young women who won elections who were single and young. I mean, the 26-year-old in Kwara State in the last elections who won in the state assembly. This was I mean, it's young, or she at the time she was 26 when she won, and a woman. But I know that the challenges are there. The truth is, providing counter narrative is for just young women who are getting into politics. You need to invest in building a profile that speaks for itself, visibility, and availability of responses to questions asked. This includes questions like religious. Some people use religion as a form of limitation to say, oh, in this religion, women are not supposed to lead. Having ready answers for me has been helpful to those of women that have emerged. And then building a strong network of support, I think, has been helpful. Nigeria
Okay.
will not change in a day. Our cultures, I mean, the very patriarchal cultures we have, unfortunately, is not going to change instantly. And so, for the few women who even get in, I always celebrate them because I know how difficult it can be. If there's anything we've learned, is you can't fight every stereotype. You fight to live another day. So you choose the issue you want to focus on and you work on that. You focus on providing counter narrative to whatever I said and defining your own place, your own name, your own identity in politics. There's this member of she used to be a member of the National Assembly, and she shared the story when she was contesting for office. One of the things during her campaigns, someone came and said, "Oh, you're a prostitute," because one of the names they call women in politics is, well, you're sleeping around, you're a woman of loose morals. That's one of the and then she said, "Oh, she realized she was fighting, expending energy fighting that narrative, and so she just told when she said, okay, yes, before I speak, let me accept it. Yes, I'm a woman of loose morals. Yes, I am a this and I'm a that. And my major client is my husband. Now, can we focus on the issue why I'm here?" I mean, people are like, and then they focus on this. She said, because she told herself, I'm going to get this out of the line. You said I am that, no problem. And her husband was like, said, yes, my husband is my major client. If you want to ask him, get more questions, meet me after the campaign. But now that I've gotten this out of the way, can we now focus on why I'm here? And she won her elections. She won more than once. That story for me was inspiring because she said she realized she was expending energy trying to fight, but what she focused on now was, okay, let me have a strong media team. I will build my name and I'll focus on the issue every time. I would not be distracted by that. That could be something helpful. It doesn't change this situation, but gradually our society will be more friendly to young people and to young women. Gradually.
All right. So I think we had one more question that came in,
Okay.
and it's really interesting. If a billionaire backs you, do you lose the right to represent ordinary people? So it's more like a Robin Hood situation. Can you take from the rich and give back to the poor?
The poor. See, two
Yes.
ways to this. There's always, once you get into power, you'd always need to balance interest. Everything you do in politics, in the process, is balancing interest, negotiating, and knowing what to fight for and what not to fight against. There are times people have been backed by billionaires and they have still delivered. And so having support, a support base, doesn't make you less likely to deliver. And I always give an example with politics. Even in the US, some of the biggest donors in politics, some of the billionaires that donate for politics, do not always determine how decisions are made, because even if there's a billionaire backing, there's someone that donated 1,000 or 1 million. And so the question is, for those engaging, do you want to be supported by one person, or do you want to have a diverse funding source, so that you can always say, hey, it was not only your money, I also got money from all of these people. And if I answer to all of these people, there will be nothing for me to do. Because when you diversify the fund and give average people the opportunity to even support you, it reduces the pressure. The other thing is, if you are supported by people that have some sense of morals, then you'll be able to negotiate with them when you're in office. It's going to be difficult, because they say he will, if the guy is paying, he has an expectation for that, which is why we're preaching the whole gospel of limit the tendency of having one person become your sole, so when it's not your family, having one person become the sole supporter of your candidacy. We've had young people who do fundraising. I think that's an opportunity to fundraise, give accountability for the monies you've received, and have different sources of funds, so that you're not a slave to one person. That's what happens. Sometimes people get in, someone has supported them, so they become a slave to the person and they do not perform at all throughout their period in office. So we need to create that balance. Each time we think about engaging politics and funding, how do we create balance and balance out power, so that you still have some level of independence and autonomy?
All right. So I'm just going to end with this final question. So we've asked you many things tonight, and thank you so
Yeah.
much for being very open and sharing a lot with us. But is there a question that you wish young Africans would ask about billionaire politics? Something that didn't come up in this conversation, or something that you don't see come up as often? Is there a question like that? So you're going to sort of ask it and answer it, so we can also get, because
Oh, this is a tough one. I'm trying to think. Is there a question like that? Or conclude your thoughts. I think you were trying to.
no, I think that's it. I think that's it. Yes.
I don't have the perfect question. I would just say I do believe that a lot of young Africans need to start asking they need to start asking themselves, why are we not engaging differently? And that's because I'm so I'm such a firm believer in the power of the youth, in the power of young people, especially because young people have the numerical strength to change systems. And but most times, what my worry is, a lot of times young people engage from the sidelines. There's that fear of, I don't want to be corrupt, so I don't get involved. It's better to just advocate from outside. We protest, 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 but we're not playing the long game. Politicians play the long game. They plan for the next elections as one is ending. Most times we vote and we leave. And I think the questions young people should be asking is, why can't we engage differently? After elections, how are we holding people to account? When we engage the process, are we identifying younger people who are contesting and building support around those young people? We have different elections. It's not just the president. We focus so much on that. National Assembly, state assemblies. If you have the right minds in those two houses, I'm telling you, you will see changes in government. But because most times we focus on just the presidential elections. After that, we don't vote for any other thing. People we have in these national and state assemblies are most times people that are not independent minded. They are just appendages of the governors or the president. They are just there to say yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. They are not representing us, they're not performing oversight, they're not making laws to promote our interest. And so, can we start building around young people who emerge, newer candidates, people that are more competent who emerge? Forget party names. We should stop this voting along party lines. Forget party names. Focus on who are those coming out from those parties. If it's the parties that are not popular, build around those parties. we must not limit ourselves to one or two parties. There are several other parties contesting. And I think that's why I said how young people engaging. We have to start asking why can't we engage differently? Can young people engage differently? That focus on influencing outcome and building power, that should be the driving force for every movement. It's not just about agonizing outside or getting angry online. Focus on how the politicians think, taking over power, electoral outcome, changing outcomes at all levels. The moment young people start thinking like that, I think a lot of things will start changing in our respective African countries.
All right. So thank you so much for thank you so much for this evening. I tried to. I think we've exceeded the time by like 2 minutes, and I promised I was going to keep things on for 1 hour. But we had a question that came in last minute. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Not just your time, but also for your honesty. I understand that kept you past your bedtime again, and we apologize. But
No
we thank
bedtime,
you.
I'm just tired. That's why.
Okay.
Before they will think I go to
But
bed very early. I'm just tired. It's been a busy week.
yeah, we understand. But
Yes.
thank you again for your time and for your honesty. You could have given us quotes, you could have just told us some stories, you could have just skidded on the surface, but you went to the wound, and we're grateful for that. So, to every young person watching tonight, you've heard what the game looks like, the price tags, closed doors, the billionaire politicking, and what I expect us to take away from this is that the game is not over. It's I think we have to work like the older politicians and play the long game. So Cynthia has been at this for over 18 years. She's still on it, and she has stayed because lasting change doesn't come from just one protest. Like she shared, not too young to run movement started in 2009, and the bill got signed into law in 2018. So you have to keep pushing, you have to keep applying pressure. Also, I think when Sam Sinitodo came and he joined us, I think was it a year ago or 2 years ago? I think a year ago. He also emphasized that power is not served a la carte. So if you're sitting down with your legs crossed and hoping that it's going to come like a buffet service, that is not going to happen. So we have to keep showing up. We have to keep showing up. And another thing to take away is that we have to mobilize differently. We we should go beyond knowing how to fill a street, knowing the hashtags to trend, but we need to learn to do things differently and sustain it. Like Cynthia said, we need to learn to push and hold momentum. And then the third one is engaging differently beyond anger, but with strategy. Register in a political party, attend the meeting, run for a ward position, just go to where power is built and then stay there quietly and show up effectively. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for showing us tonight that the door isn't completely closed. While it might be heavily guarded by people that hope we stop asking questions, but the door is open and we just have to find our way in through that door. So don't stop asking questions, keep watching, keep organizing, keep running. So thank you so much to everyone that has joined us so far and has stayed this far. Thank you so much. We've had an interesting conversation, I must say. Thank you so much, Cynthia, again. And we look forward to
Thank you.
having you again because I feel like this conversation is not yet done and we could come up with
Yes.
something else to continue this conversation because young people have to keep hearing these stories. So thank you so much for taking our time to join us this evening. I think I can see people in the comment section.
Thank you. And well done for this amazing conversation.
Saying sharing their called it an evening